All right, here we are. Elijah from Relay. What's going on, dog?
Hey, nice to meet everyone, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, psyched to have you on. Now, you were just teasing me about the last name. I wasn't getting the pronunciation right. You're Ukrainian. It's Lomaka. What is it? What does it mean?
Yeah, it's Lomaka, and it's fun because I'm trying to build companies, but the last name really means that I'm breaking stuff. It's a breaker.
You're a breaker. Okay, I like it. I like it. Now, you're from Ukraine, educated over there, and then came over here. You're living
Yeah.
in Florida right now?
No, I'm currently with my family in Missouri, the city area. I
Okay.
was in Florida last year.
Okay, you were living there, and then you're coming out to San Diego, right?
Oh yeah, I am.
Okay.
Got you.
All right, yeah, heck yeah, psyched to connect up. So, this show is helping people in the DePIN space understand what's going on from various players in it. So VCs, founders, folks like you who are building tools for deployers. Talk me through what Relay does, and then we'll talk about kind of what's next for you guys. But let's start off with what Relay does.
Yeah. By the way, amazing show. I watched like every episode, guys. Great work, and
Cool, thank you.
love to be here. So Relay is an all-in-one platform that helps large-scale deployers to build, operate, manage, and scale DeWi networks. We're building an enterprise-grade solution for automating and optimizing deployment cycle for the most important, what we see the most important user group in DeWi, which is large-scale deployers.
Right. Right, the big dog. So I'm sure a couple people with just one or two hotspots would disagree with you, but what you're dealing with is not someone with like five hotspots or 10. These are kind of
These are
much
these
bigger.
are people with hundreds, yeah, hundreds of
Yeah.
hotspots, and in fact, that's the requirement to get into the platform. And that's like the biggest differentiation between like any other tool in the industry and us is that we are really just working with. It's not going to be used by hundreds of thousands of people. It's going to be used by like maybe 100 companies in Helium and then other groups.
Right. And then so you guys are working to build this thing for Helium. I saw XNet on there. I'm assuming, well, Pollen probably was on there, but now they're off
Yeah,
because they had their own mini disaster.
it's a
What other
touchy
what
subject.
other
Yes.
projects are you looking at?
Yeah, so the first phase is to, and that's actually an interesting part because DeWi is still sort of in its inception phase, and we really want to help large scale deployers to avoid a lot of the mistakes that traditional wireless had with, because traditional wireless is such, it's been a while. It's been a while, and they're kind of in dinosaur age in many tools they're
Oh yeah,
using. They're
yeah,
forced to do it locally. They don't have a lot of cloud support. They're building these insane internal tools that they have to have teams to support them. Really want to establish a good sort of fundamental um, almost approach and deployment cycle for decentralized wireless and help most of the decentralized wireless networks that are prominent enough and that are stable enough, not like the ones we don't want to talk about. But Helium, XNet, there's also Relay Network that is coming up. Carrier One is a good one, and I'm sure there's going to be other ones. We're not really talking about larger DePIN at this stage. So, projects like Demo and HiveMapper, those are really good, well-oriented consumer projects that are, I believe, going to be driven by consumers in its initial phase. I'm
mm,
sure there's going to be a lot of enterprises that eventually going to put them on their vehicles or some other moving object. But we're solely sort of oriented on large scale deployers and wireless because wireless is in its nature a lot more technically heavy technology to deploy and maintain, and that's where we're seeing.
yeah. I was talking with the guy on Twitter the other day. I think it's Disruptive Analysis. He's an English guy, and he's like, "Hey, I'll come on your show if I can just talk about how blockchains are scams." I was like, "Well, maybe that's not the best way to do it." I'm interested because you're talking to a lot of these large deployers. Is that a pretty typical viewpoint from them? And if it is, how do you handle it?
That's a good question. I would say no because we're so heavy involved in the Helium right now. The
Mm,
first initial phase is Helium, and all of the deployers on the platform in beta, they have large,
they get it.
yeah, they get it. They're into Helium, and it's like, um, yeah, it's their network. So nobody really views blockchain and crypto as scams. There's people understand that it's next phase and get it. Got to take some time to stick with other people and go through the turbulence that
Oh
they're
yeah.
going through.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm in like a long message thread with this guy, trying to convince him that maybe there's some perspective he hasn't seen. You've got a background as a product designer. You worked for Streamlabs, Logitech, Numi. How are you applying that to Relay? What are we seeing here that is kind of a result of that?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So as a product designer and user experience designer, my number one goal when I design software, that's my background. I design software for a bunch of startups and corporations like Logitech, is take difficult concepts and deconstruct them into very simple flows. And that's what's just, it really, it's my passion for DeWi and wireless in general, is because all of these operational procedures and the way you deploy your network, and the way you even starting from the beginning, you design a network, you pick an area, you go find locations, and I'm slimming it down a lot. It's like high level breakdown. Then you go, talk to those property managers, or you buy some land to get like a tower or something, which is rarely happening by larger players. You then go get your contractors to deploy, and then if you're talking about large scale, then you have to have a team that optimizes and maintains that infrastructure. That's like Dante, nine circles of hell. Like, really, to get from that point zero where you're like, okay, I have an idea, I want to build a business, I want to provide connectivity for people in this area. Does that make sense for my company through the commercial standpoint? Obviously, with DeWi works slightly different because you have tokens and incentives there. All the way to okay, I have functional network, I have subscribers, so I have some other business model that's happening for me, and I'm able to efficiently manage and optimize and maintain that network. That's all very difficult. And as a product designer with a lot of enterprise roots, I worked with a lot of enterprise teams that were building and simplifying these concepts. Enterprises tend to really complicate things. They want to have everything, and they want to have it in a certain way. And really what you have to do is come in with a fresh perspective and say, okay, guys, this, doesn't need to be this complicated. You can really just make it very simple.
Sure.
And I believe that that's what DeWi really gives us, because it's a blank slate. It's, you start with it, and it's not like my company would come in traditional ways and, what, we will disrupt everything here, and you will all be building your network from your phones. It's going to take time to,
right.
Eventually want that to happen, but it's going to take time.
Okay. And can you give me an example of one thing that is super complicated that you've used, or that you've simplified in Relay?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. It has to be like number one thing that we're hyper focused on in our first stage. If you think about large scale deployment and DeWi, it's actually existing in traditional wireless as well, especially by your original WISPs and ISPs. Those companies tend to like to talk to commercial buildings, or maybe individuals with a lot of properties, and deploy their infrastructure on top of them, and that's wireless. With DeWi, it's really been like sort of the core model since the beginning. You have the deployer who has funds or investment to purchase a couple thousand of hotspots. That will then go find local guys or local businesses that are going to provide their rooftops or their buildings to deploy that infrastructure. And in exchange, they need to revenue share or basically pay out for their contract
right,
like rent or like revenue share or whatever else agreement there is. So that was really the number one driving factor, because payouts are usually the driving factor for us to actually build our internal software. That's what I was trying to say. And that will eventually grew in Relay and bring other deployers onto it.
Okay, so it started with payouts.
Oh yeah. We had to pay our partners on a monthly basis, and we were doing it through spreadsheets, and we had like 20 tabs, and each tab was interconnected with another one, and it was always breaking. And Helium API was not the most stable ones at times.
Yeah,
you had to have developers who were trying to solve for it and see the errors, and then you had people who came back to you. Oh, I didn't receive my payment. What happened to that? It's just a mess. So we created this interface. It's really just two stages. One is your payout report. And I would be happy to do another one where I'm just going to walk you through the platform and really show you it in action. But really have your payout report that really sums all your commissions. Commissions could be whatever and however you want to set it. It's percentage of device. It could be fixed fee for your user, if that's a referral, maybe a location, or maybe a device. And That's all handled and calculated for you in a simple report. You can see that report. You can enable other people to see that report. For instance,
Okay,
there's
so just making the thing that I mean,
oh
it's like a
yes.
simple concept, is I'm going to pay you for this thing, but it's super complicated in execution.
Yeah, it's shockingly simple concept that people like to like to overcomplicate.
Right,
But
complicate.
the big thing with payouts is that we believe they have to be automated pretty much, right? You have to have your automated report that happens, whatever cadence you select it to
Yeah,
happen on, and then you just process it, and it's effortlessly for you
perfect.
as a deployer.
Dig it. Let's actually let's kind of rewind a little bit. We'll talk about the past and then we'll finish up talking about the future. Is
Yep.
I didn't ask you at the beginning. How'd you get into helium?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. So it all started when I was working at Logitech under Streamlabs, and we were solving. So Streamlabs is the company that provides also, interestingly enough, all-in-one platform for streamers. And they had a lot of verticals that they were solving for streamers. All the way from software to hardware projects. There's been a bunch of projects inside the team, and it was like I believe 2018, 2019, 2020. So right before Helium ICO.
Yep.
And the big part with hardware projects, and we all experienced it in some capacity. You walk on street of San Francisco, you turn, and you're in the dark. You have no connectivity, pretty much.
Yep.
Right? That was the big issue with certain devices that were moving. That how do you always preserve the connectivity for them? Obviously, I was on the software side, so it touched me with user experience quite a lot. But I was following. It was a very, very interesting challenge. I was following a lot of hardware engineers, and we just stumbled upon Helium. The first time I heard of Helium was really just it was eye-opening moment because I wasn't really sure about crypto at that stage. It was all speculation and tokens and I will buy it at this and sell it with that. It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it's
2 days later, I sell it and buy my house. Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
oh yeah. That wasn't really a real world application that solves the problem.
Right.
And obviously with banking system and other ideas that originally driven crypto, that was interesting, but it was not really, it was not that to begin with me. And I saw it, I was like, oh, you know what? This is a big problem. And that's, real world application that's going to be incentivizing people to build out coverage. And I can totally see how a bunch of folks will, deploy these units across this district. And now I will have all this on connectivity with my device, to power it. And so that's how it started. Got on the call with my previous co-founders of previous companies. We're just like, you know what, we have some cash. Let's just deploy some devices and see how it goes. And it all went from then we landed on another idea. It was democratizing wealth. Yeah, that's cheesy, but that was the idea. We were like, you know what, let's buy just like 300 units in Portugal, deploy them across Porto and Lisbon, and revenue share with people. And there was, at times the Helium was 50, 60. We were paying people, 3, 4, 5,000 euros a month for them to and they just deployed that device and barely did anything. And
it was a good time. Yeah.
It was a good time. And we really, we felt proud about that. But then the winter came in and all went to shit in some way. And you started seeing a lot of big challenges with maintenance, especially some manufacturers. It really became just a race of how do we solve this problem? We had our spreadsheets at that moment. We were trying other tools. Nothing worked. And we were like, we're building this internal platform to provide better experience. That was the original idea. Provide better experience for partner scopes. Let's just expand it and include others, because that's the challenge with Shares Podcast and Long Podcast and other people. And that really kind of grew into larger vision of then moving on to other DeWi networks, making it multi-project, and eventually going into traditional wireless, which is far away, but
it's there. Dig it. Well, let's finish up by talking a little bit about what's in the future. Maybe we quickly hit kind of what you see happening in the next quarter, the next year, and then we'll just take a wild ass guess of the next 10 years.
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, surprisingly, it's not going to be a crazy answer. It's all about fundamentals at this stage.
Yeah.
So now that we're on Solana and Helium, at least for what we're seeing, doesn't plan to change drastically in any new direction. We're pretty stable. All we need to do is ensure that large scale deploys are also stable. So they're fundamentally covered for their day-to-day operations. So that's next. If I were to pick one thing that I would do in 2023 with this company, is automate and optimize every single large scale deploy on Helium. That would be my main focus. Again, you could do a lot of Solana cool things. You could do other stuff that Helium is now capable of. That will all come, but the first and most important part is what problem you're solving for users. And if we're talking about long term, it's obviously really will only grow if large scale deployers benefit it and grow as well. So that's the path we're taking. And we want to help large scale deployers land on the issue that EB3 points out a lot, is that there's just a big missing piece of business models in decentralized wireless sort of stuff. I watched your other podcast with Sal. He made a great analogy of bring your company to IPO before you actually even started like
He's a sharp guy.
That was a great analogy. And we want to through automating and optimizing large scale deploys, we want to also help them cut costs, make them well optimized, and allow them to align themselves in solving this business model problem. Obviously, that includes giving tools for large scale deployers to operate in most of the massively adopted networks like XNet, eventually going to be really in Carry One and others, and eventually other networks that Helium will enable, like the Wi-Fi. And longer term is going to be shift into traditional wireless, because it all in our vision, it all blends.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of WISPs that are deploying DeWi. There's going to be a bunch of DeWi that's going to deploy traditional wireless as well. So there's really no point for it to be separate. You can just deploy it.
Cool. Love it, dude. Love the vision. Well, with that, we'll have to have you back on and talk a little bit more about diving in, but really appreciate you taking the time. Ripping. We'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. It was a pleasure.
Heck yeah.